Again, the source is Missing Voices Coalition report, and those are the statistics of the year 2022. Let's take a look at those of 2023. And in 2023 so far, 29 cases were recorded between January and March. We're in July, but the statistics we have are up to the month of March. So between January and March, 29 cases were recorded. Out of these, 28 were of police killings, and 1 was an enforced disappearance case. Again, the source of these statistics is the Missing Voices Coalition report. And on to our last slide, because remember, I did mention that today we will be speaking with Mr. John Ndwiga, who is the father to these 2 men you see here, the Kianjokoma brothers. We all remember these. On August 1st, 2021, these 2 men were allegedly arrested on that night of August 1st, 2021. They were found dead on August 3rd, 2021. And of course, a development to these is that 6 police officers have so far been arraigned over the murders. And this is the basis of our conversation tonight. The Kianjokoma brothers, of course, just forming part of the statistics of the extrajudicial killings that we have seen in our country. And I now want to walk over to my panelists who are on the other side of our state-of-the-art studios. Mr. Charles Otieno, a security expert, and of course, Mr. J.M. Waiganjo, Commissioner IPOR. Thank you so much for joining me, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
I want to start with a reaction to the statistics we just had on the screen there. You know, so many cases of extrajudicial killings in the country, so many enforced by the police, according to that report there by Missing Voices Coalition. Let's get your reaction to that. I want to start with you, Mr. Waiganjo.
Well, yeah, it's a sad reality. In fact, we are even starting too late when we started 2021. If we go back to the history of extrajudicial killings in this country and forced disappearance, we may go very far back. But at least during the existence of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, which is about 10 years now, we have been able to do reports and also to follow up on some of those extrajudicial killings. We work with civil society organizations, and I'm familiar with the Missing Voices reports because we have linkages with the civil service. Extrajudicial killing isn't a killing that is not sanctioned by law. It's murder, of course, and the state is normally held accountable to account for any death in that regard. And that is why when you have a missing relative, people go to court to ask for a habeas corpus, and the respondents in that kind of a scenario is usually the state, the Attorney General, for instance, the Inspector General of the Police, and of course the Cabinet Secretary for Interior. So it is a sad thread, and I wanted to say that it's an ongoing thread. We at the Independent Policing Oversight Authority are very concerned. We have done our own reports, and we have also recommended that we need a commission of inquiry into cases of enforced disappearance and, of course, extrajudicial killings. Mm-hmm. So it's a conversation we are going to have, but I want to assure Kenyans and viewers that it's a life matter. It's a matter that is very alive at the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. In fact, the only obstacle that stops us from instituting a commission of inquiry is the budget.
Right.
And also, we have many, many problems because after we receive complaints of such disappearances and we carry out our preliminary investigations, when we establish that we are moving in the right direction, normally one of our biggest challenges is that the witnesses or the complainants drop out.
Right.
And therefore we are left with a complaint, but without evidence, largely because perhaps of police interference and intimidation, or settlements that can happen between the victims and the police officers.
Right. Mr. Chris, so many cases there of extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances, and the blame is on the police most of these cases are in court, but the blame again, as I said, is on the police. I want you to take us through the mind of a police in circumstances such as the demonstrations that we have been seeing in the past weeks. What goes through their mind or the psychology of a police officer?
There's a lot that goes on in the mind of a police person. Number one is the kind of instruction that he has received from his superiors on how to tackle the matter that is at hand. For example, demonstrations like what you mentioned. So when a policeman leaves a police station to go and quell these kinds of demos, there are lots of things in the background that you need to know about. Number one, maybe this police person has been working for the last 24 hours. And now he takes on something that requires him to do another several hours unknown to him that he might do. That alone will destabilize him as an individual, along with the fatigue that he's carrying on from the last hours that he's been dispensing his duties. So when he gets to that front line, all right, we are saying his mind, his line of thought mostly is not as straight as it ought to be. But he's also saying there is no instruction that will be given to a police person or a police contingency that you go there for shoot to kill. And anybody who's advocating for shoot to kill, then we are saying this is a perpetrator that IPOA needs to take some action on.
But we see that happen.
Yes. Then a lot of that, we are saying that when that happens, then the individual police person who is responsible for that act should be investigated as a police person, and the consequences that are required to be taken must be taken, because the right of that person is protected, enshrined in the Constitution, Articles 26, 28, 29, 49, 48, 51, 50 and 51. They are all in there. So we are saying this action comes forth as a result of an individual behavior, and that one must take the consequences of his actions.
Right. So let's talk about that Kianjo Koma scenario, because we lost 2 young men on one night. Now, apart from that, there were demonstrations that happened following the death of those 2 boys. And what we see a lot is these 2 young men and their case, which is in court, of course, 6 police officers arraigned. But we forget there were 2 other people that lost their lives following the demonstrations in regard to that case. And not just that, so many other people have died. Like I mentioned before, we've lost a lot of people during these demonstrations that have happened in the past weeks. What is IPOA? I know your mandate is oversight of the police, but what are you doing regarding this? Because I must say there is some bit of a mistrust from the public to IPOA.
On the Kianjo Koma issue, it is the authority that investigated that matter. And it is the authority that is the custodian of the evidence that should be produced in court in that matter. That is to say that even if the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution is the one that has the mandate to prosecute, our investigators are witnesses in that case. And I'm aware when it happened, because there was a public outcry, we did not even wait for a complaint to be filed. More often than not, we move on our own motion. So we dispatched our rapid response, and we were at the scene of crime shortly after the incident. And even on the following day, when the fracas escalated and we lost 2 more lives. So normally what IPOA would do is to set a rapid response on a matter like that, carry out investigations. We usually finish our investigations very quickly, in good time. But what the public doesn't know is that IPOA does not have prosecutorial powers. So that even when we compile our evidence, we have to take our evidence to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, who now looks through the evidence that we have and agrees with our recommendation to charge. Sometimes we will carry out our investigations and then take it to the ODPP. The ODPP may throw back the file to us with instructions perhaps to tie loose ends and still get the file back. So you see, IPOA would finish the investigations, but because we do not act alone, we forward our file to the ODPP. The ODPP, on recommending prosecution, also now forwards the file to court, which now becomes a judicial process. So sometimes the public may think that the authority is not doing anything, but we like also to be thorough, because we cannot just be citing officers and taking them to court without evidence. Because remember, they are career police officers, and the moment you charge that kind of an officer without sufficient evidence, you have blotted his career, you have, and we could also attract some litigation.
Right.
So we may be slow, but we are very sure, and the convictions we have had are more than, acquittals in every respect. But again, maybe what I should want to tell our officers here is that personal responsibility, like my good brother here has said, is key, and also command responsibility. And an officer cannot come and have a defense that he was obeying lawful orders. Those orders are unlawful. And therefore, each officer who is on the beat with instructions from their seniors must know that an illegal direction from your senior does not exonerate you. In fact, the criminal culpability of a police officer who has committed that kind of a crime is personal. Command responsibility also comes because those who give instructions are also held liable. We have the Baby Pedo case in Kisumu where the command responsibility was very well expounded. So we have seen those instances even during these demonstrations, and I would really want to tell our officers to be very, very careful when they are out there brutalizing protesters, because protesters are taking note, they are taking photos, there are very many clips, and we have done quite a bit of investigations, and the Kenyans will start seeing officers appearing in court, because criminal culpability, even if it takes how many years, it has no limitation of time. So one way or the other, you will be caught up with the actions that you are doing. I had the congratulatory messages from politicians to the police, telling them they have done a good job. Don't celebrate yet, because today you are told you have done a good job, tomorrow you are the one to take a plea. And that politician who is telling you have done a good job will not be with you in the
Right, hold it right there. I'll come back to you with some numbers on these cases that IPOA has been investigating. But police are being told, congratulations for a good job done.
That was an unfortunate statement, I want to say, and support what the commissioner has said. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be an individual, all right? But at the same time, when you look at it, we have police trained to execute on their jobs. And in this training, they are told, at what particular time can you use lethal force or can you use excessive force, right? But you'll find that for it to be termed extrajudicial, the amount of force that has been used is not warranted. And that is not a command issued to a police officer, right? So it becomes an individual responsibility.
What are these instances that they can use excessive force?
You can use excessive force when your life is in danger. When my life as a police person is in danger and I have my firearm, I'm authorized by United Nations conventions and other conventions to defend myself by using lethal force. But in the instances where we have seen, where police are enforcing, doing law enforcement or counterterrorism operations, or in political instances, political violence instances, they go ahead and use lethal force. Then you find that the two do not match. The definition or the provision of lethal use of force and the instance where he is appearing and using that lethal force does not. But the instances, like I want to say, that yes, lethal force is authorized. So
again, back to the question on the mind of a police person, because we have seen cases of excessive force being used by police. Unwarranted. Fine. I had a conversation with someone, prior to this discussion, and they were saying that sometimes they feel provoked by citizens. Someone will say, "Ni shoot, ni uwe," But this person is unarmed. I mean, the only thing this person has is like a stone, for instance, and you cannot compare a stone and a firearm.
Absolutely.
So what warrants these excessive use of force?
I would say at that particular time, a lot of things will run in the mind of that police person. Somebody telling you, "Shoot me," all right? That is not provocation. And even if you shoot him, it's not self-defense, all right? That is a statement that you must be using. You have been trained to know that this is a conflict that can easily be resolved by either me taking the required force to quell it and not excessive force. The only time excessive force is allowed is defined clearly when my life is in danger. In that kind of a threat, a stone versus a gun, like you do so well compare, is totally unwarranted, totally unwarranted. And that's why myself and the commissioner are on point that is a down and dirty game, and the only way to respond to it is that police person taking individual responsibility for what he has done.
Mr. Weganjo, let's take a look at some numbers here. In my research, I came across a performance report that is January to June 2021, and these are basically the cases that have been investigated by IPOA. And since the inception of IPOA in November 2011, IPOA has received 19,490 complaints. That is as at 2021, And out of these, only 3,022 were concluded. Out of these, again, the authority has secured 12 convictions, while 98 case files were before courts as at 30th June 2021. Is that enough?
Well, the figures have tremendously changed.
Of course they have. Of course they have.
And what I want to say is that the number of convictions should not give you any idea, because even us at IPOA, you know, our responsibility is not only to prosecute and get convictions. It is also to professionalize the service. In fact, that's our core mandate. And also, of course, to investigate serious injuries and deaths, particularly in custody. We normally take up complaints like you have led, but we have other players within the sector that we sometimes pass over the cases to. We have the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, which pretty much also does human rights work. And there are instances where we will feel that some of the complaints we have are domiciled with them. We have other complaints that we refer to the Internal Affairs Unit of the National Police Service because they are disciplinary in nature, and they can be settled at the Internal Affairs Unit unless that unit is reluctant and we have a mandate to take back that case or even to take over the matters that they themselves are investigating. So it may appear that the convictions we are getting could judge us, but the point is we go out to investigate, to oversight, and also to make sure it does not happen, to make sure those excesses do not happen. We do not wait for them to happen so that we take officers in court. We also look at the welfare of police officers because right now, even if it is the responsibility of the National Police Service Commission, we have a very, very sleepy National Police Service Commission, which I do not, in fact, talk about the welfare of the officers, nor do they implement the recommendations that we give them. And therefore, I think, and the Inspector General is a member of that commission. The two DIGs are also members of that commission, and two other police officers. So I think it's time we look at the constitution of that commission and see what we can do to enable it to look at the welfare of the officers. Because like the way you are asking the mind of a police officer, we have a lot of recommendations that we have even given to the Presidential Task Force on Police Reforms.
Right.
And we are very hopeful that they will be implemented because there's a lot. The police officers, promotions,
Mr.
transfers.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just hold it right there. I'm told we need to take a break, but when we come back, we'll talk about those recommendations, yeah? Okay, so stay with me. We're taking a short break. Stay with us. We shall come back with more.
Nimekuwa nikicheza for long kama miaka 2 hivi. Ile tu kucheza tu naona watu wanashi.
The news that matters the most is the one that hits close to home. When disasters strike, we are there to inform you. When the bullets are flying, we tell you who's shooting and why. Reporting on your victories, your health, your money, your security, your past, present, and future. We are interested in telling the stories of creativity, hard work, and resilience that you are known for.
That is our job. This is my job. My name is Victor Moyakane, and it's my honor to bring you this news this way every Thursday night on the home of Untold Stories.
Katika majengo haya, hapa ndipo sheria zinapotungwa na zinapopakuliwa. Nitakuletea viongozi mbalimbali, mirengo mbalimbali, wote kwa pamoja wakipika na kupakua. Tutawapa nafasi kuweza kuangazia changamoto na mafanikio ya ugatuzi katika ukumbi wa siasa kila siku ya Jumanne kuanzia saa 1 kamili na kuendelea.
Toka eneo hili la Naivasha kwenye kaunti 032, gatuzi la Nakuru.
Toka kaunti ya Elgeyo Marakwet, kaunti 028.
Nikiripotia runinga ya TV47 kutoka kaunti ya Wajir.
Nikiripotia TV47 kutoka kaunti ya Turukana. Kwa matukio yote yanayojiri katika kaunti hii 012.
Kutoka kaunti nambari 1, kaunti ya Mombasa.
Nikiripotia TV47 kutoka kaunti ya Lamu.
Nikiripotia TV47 kutoka Kisii County.
Nikiripotia TV47 kutoka
Right, thank you so much for staying with us. Keep your feedback and questions coming. I see them, I'll sample them in a few. On Twitter, at TV47 News, on Facebook, at TV47 Kenya, and my handle is at Grace Korea KE. Mr. Weganjo, before we took a break, you were talking about the recommendations that you gave on the police welfare, that IPOA gave, that is.
Yes, and we have an advantage because we also have a commissioner who sits in that task force. So we are hopeful that our recommendations will be carried along. Most of them are in the area of the police insurance, for instance, the transfer policy, the promotion policy, those who go to work in hardship areas, how long should they stay there? Even the change of the command structure. We have a merger of the administration police and the Kenya Police Service, and we are recommending more trainings to our police officers, more psychosocial support to those officers, improvement of their salaries and allowances. So there's a lot that goes on, by the way, in the mind of a police officer. If you visit them, if you go and see the kind of lives they lead, especially those in hardship areas, you really sympathize. They are very young officers. They are very poorly paid. They are very poorly fed. Sometimes the allowances hardly even gets to them. Even these ones you see landing up and down with protesters. They will have slept in a lorry the whole night. And then in the morning they do not have breakfast, they don't have water, they don't have masks. Themselves are victims also of protesters. We have seen protesters using slings.
That's true.
A sling, that's a bullet.
That's true.
So even as we condemn our officers of brutality, let us also try to see where they are coming from, and particularly the commanders in that regard. Mm-hmm. So we would want to see the police officers being looked after, and at the same time, we want them to have appropriate and proper trainings, particularly at the point of induction, so that they know their role and duties, and the excesses that they can make, and even when to use force.
Yes.
But I'm also aware that the extrajudicial killings became worse after the 2010 Constitution came into play, and you find that bail and board became a constitutional prerogative. Mm-hmm. So that criminals are arrested today. Of course, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. Tomorrow they are out on board, and perhaps those police officers are the ones who arrested them. Maybe they were armed. So the next round, instead of causing the arrests, you find that they have extrajudicial killing coming along. So.
Right. Mr. Chris, we'll come back to the welfare, actually. I want that to be part of your parting shot. But before we get there, there's a drift, a huge drift, between Mwananchi and police. Mwananchi sees police as an enemy, yeah? Mm. And actually, I did list down some kind acts of police officers so that it doesn't look like we're castigating them, you know. I mean, there's a tattoo driver who used a policewoman as a shield in town just the other day, as a shield from an irate crowd. There's a Gladys Kimani here who pulled a heartwarming act after helping a KCPE candidate babysit a baby while the mother was sitting, for her examination. So it's not all of them that are, on the spotlight for negative things. But then again, if a police officer shows up, probably not here, but will tend to not want to be associated with them, yeah? Why is this drift there, and what do we do to mend it?
The drift has been caused about by partly and largely by what we are discussing right now. It's a judicial killing, which has had repercussions or ripple effects in the form that the positive relationship between police and public has dwindled or has drifted really to the south. There is no that relationship between the public and the police because of what is happening. But like you well said, and I also want to repeat that, police are also human beings. They are feeling just like we have feelings. They will react emotively just like the way we have. They are also subject to psychological torture and stresses from what they do and from what my commissioner, my brother here, has mentioned. But we are saying the right thing to do is to have structures that are inclusive in terms of us approaching for solutions. How do we close or how do we bridge the gap that is there between the public and the police in terms of the work that is there? When I see a police person, I am supposed to see some safety structure. I'm supposed to see some security structure. But what has happened, that has been negated and that has been turned around. When you see a police person, depending on the event that is going on or current event that is going on, you will react. If you go to traffic and a police person stops you, the next thing you want to think is negative. Yeah. When a police officer shows up here and asks, "Hey, good morning, can I see some form of ID from you?" You freak out. You become absolutely defensive and start looking at coping mechanisms. Majority of them will think of running away. When you run away, it creates suspicion, right? But the thing is, the gap is so wide. And the only way we can close it down is inclusive discussions, seeking for inclusive solutions where both public and police participate.
Right.
Show good faces on both of us.
Right. Mr. Weganja, we've been asking for feedback from our viewers, and there's one question I see here directed to you. It might be an unfair question, but I understand where this person is coming from because he probably hasn't seen much of this. So he is asking, at RK_Kelvin24 is asking, why don't they, that is IPOA, speak when police are killed in the line of duty?
We do that all the time. In fact,
probably hasn't seen it.
Yeah, 30% of the complaints that we get are from the police officers themselves, because the officers do not trust the internal affairs unit, and we are the only other civilian oversight body that they can come to, and we take those complaints incognito sometimes because we don't want to expose them. So I want to encourage the viewers not to lose faith in an institution like the independent policing. I don't know where the country would be if the police were not oversighted, because, as you know, police cannot investigate themselves. They have to be investigated by an independent civilian body like the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. Of course, we do not act up to our capacity because even our establishment is low. Our budget is low. Our officers are fully stretched. But we have a 24-hour toll line at 1559, and anybody can call that number and register their complaint. And I want to encourage members of the public to follow up on those complaints, to correct data and evidence. Now we have even cameras, phones with cameras, so that when it gets to proper investigations, we are able to investigate. We are not the only, we do not prosecute, like I said before. So we need the members of the public to have patience with us as we carry out those investigations. But we want to assure the public that we are on this matter. We both look at the welfare of the police officers, but we also oversight them, and we take them to court when the need arises. So I want to warn our officers to be careful, because we will stop at nothing as the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. We have a constitutional mandate, and we must carry out our duties as per the law requires us to do.
Right. So I need to get your parting shots, gentlemen, because we are completely out of time. It's almost 10 p.m. I'll start with you, Mr. Chris. Yes. And here we can talk about what we're saying about the police welfare. Because at the end of the day, on Wednesday this week, we're going to have Maandamanos. Most probably, we're going to see a repeat of what has happened in all the past Wednesdays and Fridays whenever we've had these demonstrations. So what do we do between now, Sunday, and Wednesday to ensure that on Wednesday we report 0 deaths and even 0 injuries, perhaps?
I think the biggest burden falls on the two principals. If the two principals sit down and have a discussion, that would be an end to all these things, yeah? That would completely be an end to all these things. Because even when we were guaranteed by the two highest officers in the country that we go back to duty and things will be okay, you see that majority of Kenyans, some of them really decided, no, I'm not going to take a chance because my security is not guaranteed. So the only way is we have a solution, a bipartisan solution where we say these things have come to an end. And just to add to what the commissioners say, extrajudicial killing will also involve killing of police persons by either gangs, or by the public, or something like that. And you're also saying that right now, some police persons are in hospital, managing wounds. So what are we saying? Part of the welfare of police should be equipping them for this kind of job. What kind of equipments do they have to really mitigate the possibility of them getting injured while they're executing on their duties? That should be part of the welfare. But the biggest chunk of the solution is in bipartisan talks. Right.
Mr. Weganja, your parting shot, and part of it should be on some of the comments that I'm seeing from people here, because their concern is whether IPOA has the muscle or the ability. I know you have been doing it, but whether you guys have the muscle, the ability to investigate, to follow up, to have perpetrators arraigned and possibly convicted.
We definitely are up to the task. We are up to the task. We are doing all that is required of us. We have our officers and investigators spread across the country. We are in 8 regions, and we have offices in all those 8 regions. But I would want to plead with the Inspector General of Police to give proper equipment to the officers and when the demonstrations are happening, to follow the law. We have seen protesters being injured and being left where they have been injured. The law requires that when an officer injures a person, he must report, or he or she must report to the senior. Does that happen? It doesn't happen. Must report to the senior immediately. Secondly, he must give first aid and facilitate that injured person to be taken to the hospital. Thirdly, his commander must inform IPOA within 24 hours of such an injury or death, so that we also come in and investigate. Because sometimes we even exonerate the officers for using their firearms if we find that they have, gone according to their police standing orders and code of conduct.
Right. In under a minute, how can people reach IPOA if they want to report such cases?
We have a toll line 1559, which is free. We have 8 regions. We are in Mombasa, we are in Nairobi, which is our headquarters. We are in Nyeri, we are in Meru, we are in Garissa, we are in Kisumu, we are in Eldoret, and we are in Kakamega. So we can be reached in any one of those offices. You can also call us, and you don't have to disclose your name. And we want to encourage you to do that, because we are a public institution funded by taxpayers' money, and we must do what is required of us by the law.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. J.M. Waiganjo, Commissioner, IPOA, Independent Policing Oversight Authority, and of course, Mr. Chris Otieno, a risk, security, and public safety consultant. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I didn't lie. We had Mr. John Ndwiga, the father to the Kianjakoma brothers, but unfortunately, because of some technical hitches, we were not able to get him online. We'll try to get him some other time. And I should have also mentioned that we tried to reach out to the National Police Service to have them join this conversation, but that was not possible. So that's where we ended. Thank you for your feedback, for your questions. We do appreciate that. My name is Grace Kuria Kanja, and of course, our sign language interpreter has been Rhoda Nyamai. And up next is TV47 Country Ride with DJ Rom Ace and Sheriff Joe Crucial. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, God bless you.